Hey everyone, and welcome back to Joy at Work. It's so good to be with you again. It's August 10, 2020. The year keeps chugging along. I hope you're staying safe and doing well. Since my last video, Arsenal won the FA Cup. Yay, right. Did not see that coming. Great surprise. Wonderful surprise, really, to end the season. I guess I should have worn an Arsenal jersey this morning, but I truly was in an Atlanta United mood. So, Atlanta United it is. In the last two videos that I've done, I've talked about feedback and how feedback can be so valuable to us, how we are always receiving feedback, whether it's direct or indirect, explicit or implicit. I've also talked about how we have a choice on how we want to use feedback, and really at the end of the day, how feedback is for us and not for anybody else. So even though we may not like who gives us the feedback or in the way it was given and things like that, if we can get past all of that, the feedback really is for us. And then at the end of the day, really, we have a choice. Like, just because somebody gives us feedback doesn't mean we need to use it, right? But we want to be very intelligent and wise, really, about what we do with feedback. Because if we reject it out of hand because it doesn't agree or meet some standard, we might be missing an opportunity potentially to improve ourselves. So, selfishly, feedback's about us. And in the previous videos, I've talked about things that get in the way of accepting feedback. I talked about when feedback goes against kind of who we think we are, our identity can be tough to accept. I also talked about when the relationship with the person giving us feedback isn't maybe where it needs to be, or it's not in a place where we would accept feedback for that person. So for instance, if you feel that person's not qualified to give you feedback, doesn't live up to certain values to give you feedback, then you just discard the feedback out of hand. And we talked about how those two triggers, as they're called in things for the book Things for the Feedback, can kind of get in the way of receiving feedback and making use of it. The last thing that I will talk about on this topic of feedback is when we receive feedback that we don't believe is the truth, right? So Stone and Sheen call this the truth triggers, and this is feedback that comes to us and we just don't believe it's true. It's flat out wrong. And I'm sure we've all received feedback like this in the past, where somebody has said something about us or said something to us in the context of feedback, and we're like, no, that's not true. That's not how it happened. That's not what I did. That's not the way it went down, right? Just our that's just our natural response in many cases. When we hear something that we do not believe is true for a variety of reasons, it's very, very easy to discard or ignore the feedback. And again, the choice is ours of what we want to do with feedback. But what I'm encouraging us to do is not miss the opportunity to improve because of these initial responses that we may have to the feedback that comes to us. So, how do we deal with feedback that doesn't seem true? All right, this is an interesting one, especially for me. I have a really hard time with this kind of feedback. If it's not true, or if I feel it's not true, my natural inclination is to kind of ignore. And isn't it ironic that when we give feedback, we're pretty convinced that it's true, but when others give us feedback, we always see the gaps and the holes in it, right? That's just the way we work. Well, the book gives us certain tips that I'm going to share with you here quickly, but the first thing I think that I would suggest, and I've tried to practice, is this idea of just trying to understand. I think it was Covey who said, seek to understand, right? So I think trying to understand where that person is coming from is really, really important. And this is where I think empathy can be very key. So empathy is not necessarily saying I agree with you or I saying that, you're right, but empathy is saying I'm going to hear you and hear what you say, right? So engage in this process of genuine exploration. Again, it's your choice whether you want to do this, but if you're going to do it, engage in exploration and say, let me hear what you're saying, right? Let me understand you. In addition to being open to understanding and exploring, right? I think it's also very important to accept that we all have multiple interpretations. Or have you ever gone and watched a movie or show or something with somebody and walked out of that movie and said, "Hey, what did you notice?" And that person noticed something completely different from you. We all kind of process the world based on our filters. And so while it might have not seemed true to you because of your filters, it's very possible that an individual saw something and processed it differently. And so accepting the fact that multiple interpretations can exist is really, really important if you're exploring what's true or not. Yeah, there's some things that are just factually true, right? Like you dropped the book, and no one's going to argue about that. But there are other times where true comes a little bit subjective. It's a function of how are we looking at it, and how are we making sense of what happened. And until we can engage in dialogue, right, and not debate, because debate is oppositional, but dialogue has a mutual goal of understanding what's going on here. Can we really, really say, okay, this was your interpretation and this was my interpretation? It's also important to remember that multiple things can be true at the same time. Yeah, it can be raining outside and the sun be shining. I'm sure we've all seen it before. So that it doesn't seem true to us doesn't mean that it's not true. We all have blind spots. We could have missed it. We could have not seen something. This is why it's often very important when somebody comes to you with feedback to say, "All right, thank you very much. I've understood it." And then check with people that you trust to say, can you help validate this feedback? Because maybe it is a blind spot. Maybe it is something that you just haven't noticed, and this individual had the courage or whatever. Or even if it wasn't courage, maybe they wanted to spite you. I mean, who cares? Maybe they came and they've told you this. It's an opportunity for you to take that feedback and check with others and say, hey, is this true, right? Do I do this at times, or do I act in this way, or give me feedback on this thing? So just because it doesn't seem true to you at first doesn't mean that there isn't something there. There could be something there. Again, feedback is total, it's our prerogative on how we want to handle feedback. I gotta keep repeating that, right? You just because people give you feedback doesn't mean you have to take it. Just because you become very, very good at accepting or receiving feedback, so to speak, doesn't mean you have to process it. It doesn't mean that at all. But what I'm trying to encourage us all to do for ourselves, again, maybe a little bit selfishly, is to say, hey, I got some feedback. Is there anything in there, right, that I can use to make myself, to improve myself, to serve my teams better, to enjoy my work experience better, to just be a better human being, period. So again, I'm just going to repeat these three aspects a little again. When you hear something feedback that seems untrue, be patient and say, hey, I'm going to try and understand this. I'm going to be empathetic, not necessarily meaning that I agree with you, but I'm just going to hear you out. I'm going to try to understand. I'm going to work with you. Accept that we all have multiple interpretations of things, or like multiple interpretations can be present in a situation. My interpretation is not the only interpretation, or at least not the only valid interpretation. And last but not least, we all have blind spots. Multiple things can be true at the same time. So check your blind spots, go to people you trust and ask them, hey, to ask them to validate whether what you've been told is true. All right, there you go. So next week I'll try and recap all three in one video so you've got them all together. But today was about truth, or dealing with feedback we think is untrue. Again, don't forget, this is about you and how I handle feedback. This isn't easy, can be difficult at times, but it's for our own good. Thanks for watching again. Don't forget to subscribe, give me feedback. I'll see you all next time. Bye.